Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to talk to you about everything to do with Embers. So I get a lot of questions from time to time, especially from new players, about how to use their Embers, how to use their experience cards. And so on screen, you guys can see the various tiers of Embers that are available to you, and they're just commonly referred to that, even though they each have different names. But essentially, the evolution of FGO has allowed us to take a unique approach to the way we handle experience cards. Number one on that list is that as time goes on, as your account levels up, as your master level increases, you will gain access to better and better nodes that you can farm. And as a result of that, you will gain access to better and better quality and efficiency of Embers. So you guys are going to see that a big chunk about what I'm going to be talking to you today is going to be about efficiency. And the key thing to understand on this is a basic principle that when leveling a unit, the cost of doing anything, of enhancing the unit, is going to cost you QP. That is dependent on the unit's level, not the quality of the material you're putting in. So, for instance, if you put in a 1-star Ember, the cost is the same QP cost as you would if you're putting in a 5-star Ember. Because of that, you naturally have a leaning towards the higher tiers of Embers. Now, let me explain why. The reason for that is because QP becomes a, I'm not going to say difficult resource for people, but a strained resource as you're working on and investing in your units. So naturally, people wish to cut QP costs down. They wish to be as efficient as they possibly can in terms of QP. Now, the problem is, due to the rarity of experience cards, you get different experience amounts. So you guys can see here, this is the amount of experience you'll get when you have a normal use of the card. However, if you use an experience card with the correct class, you will gain a bonus to that. So again, right here, you guys can see, just looking at the 1-star Ember, you get 200 more experience. Where this becomes a lot more of an issue is definitely down here in the 4 and 5-star Ember range, where you start looking at the actual gap. So the conventional wisdom is to always use an experience card on the class that it's meant for. Now, there is an exception to this, and that's all Embers. Again, the ones you guys can actually see on screen that don't really have any sort of class depiction on them. They instead just have this weird sort of all symbol up in the top left corner. Those give bonus no matter who you use them on. So you never get normal experience with them, ironically enough, since they depicted it here. But still, the good part about them is because they always give bonus, you can use them anywhere. Now, I will tell you that the smart way to do that is to use them on extra classes first if you have them, because that way they'll get bonus experience. Otherwise, if you try to use a class specific Ember on an extra class, you're only going to get the normal experience, so you're going to get a little bit of a loss there. Similarly, just to kind of circle back here, the one thing I want you to understand is that because the QP cost is always the same dependent on level, so as your unit levels up, the QP cost increases. That means that efficiency becomes way more of a big deal, as you start needing more and more and more experience to actually level up one more time. Suddenly the cost goes up more and more and more by virtue of the fact of, again, it might take you only a handful of 1-star Embers to level at a really low level. But if you're talking about leveling up in the like 80s, 90s, even beyond into like 100, all of a sudden it starts taking an exorbitant amount of Embers to actually level. So you start thinking about it from this standpoint, and you start going like, okay, wow, that is, the 5-stars are the ones where we're going to spend the least amount of QP. We're also going to spend the least amount of Embers doing that. But there's another consideration here that I'm going to talk about. Now, the big thing to understand here is, as you look at this, the conventional wisdom has pretty much been, in the early game, you're okay to use your bronze Embers. I think right as you begin the game, you don't have access to any Embers, so any Ember you get as a drop is just a blessing in disguise. You can also get them from rolling out your FP, so I highly recommend you do that. Do not set up the burning or anything like that right away, because that can help out your account as you're rolling out trying to get the other units that you can acquire free to play from the FP roll. Again, you should always get 5 copies of them and lock them down. But still, as we're looking at this, you start to see that the bronze embers very quickly get outpaced in terms of their overall efficiency. You look at the jump right here, just from a 2-star to a 3-star, and it starts getting pretty insane. Even then, 2-star embers are the same as 1-star. You're probably going to be burning them the majority of the time. Again, right at the beginning of the game, it's okay, but you want to pretty much just start burning them. So the conventional wisdom is, after you've gotten out of those first couple levels, after you've actually unlocked some of the higher up ember gathering nodes, just burn all your bronze embers. They're not worth it. You're not going to get really any value, and it's actually going to cost you more QP trying to use them over something else. Similarly here, we get a sort of similar approach to silver embers, and I'll explain that other reason I was talking about now. So as we start to look to silver embers, obviously they're way more efficient than the 1 and 2-star ones. The issue that you have here with this is that they're still not going to be as efficient as the 4 and 5-star ones, but I think it's common knowledge that, one, you are a-okay to use silver embers at a low level, where again the QP costs aren't that high anyways, and 2, it's okay to fill in a silver ember if you realize that you were actually going to hit the cap with the silver ember versus, say, the gold. So what do I mean by that? Well, again, you look at this and you can see that the silver ember would give you about 10 grand in terms of experience. So should you use the gold embers when you were, say, 10 grand away from leveling then? No, you should just go ahead and use the silver if it'll get the job done. Why? Because it's just a saving of efficiency for you if you can get away with it. But honestly, most of the time, most players nowadays just burn their silver embers. And you might be asking why that is, because they look like they're still pretty good for you. Why would you burn something that could be of use to you? And I'll explain. One is the fact that, honestly, as you start getting towards end game, the 4 and 5-star embers are super plentiful and easy to get, both in terms of from campaigns and events, and also in terms of just being able to grind them. They're not hard to acquire. So when you consider that, there's another resource that often becomes very difficult for newer players, and that's mana prisms. They have a really hard time getting them. Well, fun fact, if you ever burn a 3-star ember or higher, you will get mana prisms out of that. Well, that's interesting, you say, but then why not burn the 4 and 5-star embers? Here's the reason. When you burn a 3-star ember, you only get 1 mana prism. When you burn a 4-star ember, you only get 1 mana prism. So what I'm saying here is, you don't gain any benefit from burning higher level embers as a result. Instead, it's better to burn the least efficient ember to do that. So this is typically why a lot of accounts nowadays just burn their silver embers. They just want easy mana prisms, and especially if you're a new player, you're constantly going to be playing catch up on those. Yes, you will get mana prisms from events, especially from lotto events if you do a lot of grinding, but it's not going to be enough. You're going to need every mana prism you can get for a while. Even my JP account is still, after years, catching up to some of the needs, some of the requirements on its mana prisms. They're admittedly very small needs at this point. Calling them a need is actually a bit of a misnomer. But there are things that I can still do with my mana prisms besides just buying the monthly shop. So that's the reason I'm trying to say this, is you're going to need a lot. So typically we advise you guys to burn your silver embers, especially as you start getting access to the nodes that drop gold embers. Now, the other thing to keep in mind too is that lack of efficiency. In order to level up a unit with, for instance, 4-star embers, it would take basically triple the cost to do a silver ember, a 3-star ember. And that is because, again, you're getting functionally triple the experience for the same QP cost per ember. That's the issue at play. So as you start getting into the higher levels of leveling up a unit, it starts becoming really expensive, and you want to use the least amount of embers possible to achieve your goal. Now, there's another thing to keep in mind, and that's the farming aspect that I talked about. So again, as we look to this here, you guys can see this is actually from my new player guide, and the reason I pulled this up is because you really won't find it in too many other resources, including fandom. It actually doesn't really mention this, but there is a rotation of daily ember gathering nodes in your Chaldea gate. depending on the day, there is actually a rate up class. A lot of people don't know that. They see, for instance, that a Monday here on the NA server gives Lancer and Assassin with some Berserkers. Ironically enough, it's actually the Assassin Major Day. So you will get more Assassins spawning on that day versus, again, say Thursday over here, where you will actually get more Lancers spawning instead. So again, this is a little known aspect of the Ember Gathering nodes that a lot of people don't catch on to because the game doesn't really tell you. One of the only ways you can tell is actually by looking at which class is on top in this right section. The class that displays on top is the major class for that node for that day. So again, that's the easy way to tell. I should also certainly mention, for those of you guys playing on JP, and again, eventually for NA, we will be headed to this, but they have changed the way that the schedule works. So now there's a double up on some days. Again, you guys can see Tuesday has both the Rider major node and the Archer major node in that one. And then Saturday and Sunday instead have all variants of all the nodes available. So that's a little bit of a change. It's not the same schedule as NA, but I did want to bring that up that, hey, yeah, that is a thing. Again, you have that going for you. Honestly, one of the other big issues here is that I see people asking about is when to level. When do you actually choose to level your unit? Is there a better time to do it? And the answer is yes. Essentially, you will have campaigns that come out from time to time that are either half cost or 2 times, 3 times success rate. Those are good times to level your units. Another classic consideration would be any time in which, say, the efficiency of the node that you were going to run is half cost, like Ember Gathering, or a sort of influx of a lot of embers is occurring, lottos and opening lotto boxes. So those tend to all be great times to actually work on and level your units. Same thing for grailing them. You typically want to do it when it's most efficient to do so. Now, you may find that you have a hard time actually holding on to a lot of embers. If you're dealing with opening boxes in a lotto, this is where mailbox stacking becomes a thing. And I actually have a video on that. I'll put the link in the description for you guys to check out. And again, there's also your second archive that you guys can use to store a ton of embers. Now, I highly recommend, if you're going to buy upgrades to your second archive, do it to the servant segment first before you ever do it to the craft essence segment. Reason why? It's not just servants, it's also experience cards that you can store it with that. So that tends to be the much better initial upgrade to your second archive, which is going to use you more of those mana prisms, but it'll allow you to store more, hoard more for those lucrative times to actually do it. Now, again, don't feel bad if you come up to the point where it's like, oh no, I'm full and I can't save anymore. We don't have a half cost campaign. We don't have a 2 times, 3 times success campaign. Oh no, what do I do? Easy. Just go ahead and use some of them. Don't use too much. Try to save as much as you possibly can. But again, it's still a good idea to use it rather than lose it. Don't let stuff expire out of your mailbox. Don't have to burn things that you could have otherwise used. Again, if you find that you're mat locked as well, try to address those needs ahead of time. Try to plan out your resources so that you don't end up in that point. Now, the last question that I often get asked is, Khad, how difficult is grailing and when should I do it in this game? Honestly, I'm of the opinion that you should not grail early in your account's history. I understand the temptation is there and that a lot of people go after their favorite unit right out of the get-go when they start playing the game. If that's what gives you enjoyment, who am I to stop you? But I will say the smart choice is to actually wait and save grailing till later in your account's history, till you're at sort of the end game and stuff like that, for the reason being that it's just more efficient to do so, as well as, honestly, you're going to deprive yourself some of your account's capability if you grail too soon. Investing all of the resources into grailing a unit probably ends up costing you leveling up an entire other unit. So that's why I typically advise newer players to wait, also because that allows them to defer their choice until they're absolutely sure. I've definitely seen grail regret from new players where they thought they needed to grail a unit for gameplay and they realized they just actually didn't, because a lot of the early game gets kind of handled for them by big carries and solos. So I will again emphasize holding off until you're absolutely sure that that is the unit you want to grail. Grail for love and you won't ever regret it. Now, I do want to show you guys again, I'm going to pull up my Chaldea app here, and it's going to be a little bit hard to see, so we'll try to zoom in as much as I can here. But essentially, if you guys are looking at this, this is 4-star experience Embers and how much it would cost you to grail a unit to 100. So you guys can see here, it would cost you 631 4-star Embers. Now, if I were to flip this over here to 5-star Embers, it would only cost you 213. Now you still might be thinking, wow, that's a lot. And again, you can see the QP cost and how much it's going to cost you over here. But the reason that that looks exorbitant to you, let me go ahead and tell you, you haven't seen anything yet. Okay, it takes a lot to start leveling units beyond 90, especially. But as we start to look at this, what if I were to show you how much it's going to cost you to move to 101? So for instance, looking at 101, you guys can see it's 209 5-star Embers now. Again, for 4-star Embers, that would be 627. It's roughly as much Embers to level up once after 100 as it is to level all of 1 to 100. So this is why I say this for anyone trying to embark on leveling to 120. When you level up every single time after 100, it's like you leveled that unit to 100 again. So leveling a unit to 120 means you've leveled the unit to 100 21 times. It is a lot of Embers, and allow me to show you right now. So just going from 100 to 120, boom, there you go, 12,000 Embers. Your Chaldea cannot possibly hold this many. That is a huge undertaking, and you guys can understand why it is a grinding event, why people work on it over time. So keep that in mind, and you don't have to go all the way to 120. Keep in mind, with especially low star units, you can grail them up to 80, 90, whatever, and you can still get a lot of bang for your buck out of that. But I think a lot of people like to really flex their favorite units. They like to go to 100 or even 120, and that definitely takes a lot. As we look at the 5-star Embers here instead, it's still 4,000 5-star Embers that it's going to take you guys to go from 100 to 120. So again, I have to emphasize that this is quite the undertaking and tell you guys, please wait until your account is in a good place where it's well-rounded and you guys can actually focus on other things because you have enough of a robust account to be able to handle the threats upcoming that you will face. Once you have your account in a good position, you can start working on extra projects like this that are meant, frankly, for in-game players. And again, I think you'll find that with the tips I propose to you in this video, you'll be very efficient and you should definitely have your account headed in the right direction. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Also, feel free to check me out on both Twitter and Twitch, as well as don't forget to subscribe here to the YouTube channel if you like the the content. And I will see you guys for the next video. Have a good one. Later.